Since the invention of the internet, the lives of most people have changed. It got to the point where almost everyone I knew wanted a computer. We finally joined the computer generation a few years ago, gave in, and bought one. At first, it was a new toy in the house. Deb, my wife, used it for email and gaming. The kids, Kyle and Kayla, used it for games and some homework. I used it to search the internet and watch some videos. That's what I did on many late evenings after work. I worked the second shift and finished work at the factory at midnight. I didn't want to go to bars like a lot of guys. After all, I was married. That's why I always went home. Everyone was asleep, so I sat down at the computer. After a while, it became the same thing and got boring. I really didn't become addicted like many people say. I went on story sites and read stories about everything imaginable. I couldn't believe most of what I read. Did people actually do these things, or were they just fantasies? I became immersed in stories of unfaithful wives, all these women cheating on their husbands. It's hard to believe, but it made me think. And so I began to observe my wife's behavior. When we went out, I would mention to her that she was dancing too close or being too nice to different guys. We actually argued about this. I knew she was a beautiful woman, but I really had no reason not to trust her. I started checking her clothes in the laundry basket or looking at our emails. It's so stupid what thoughts come to me after reading these stories. I began to read less and less, but many thoughts still remained. I remember reading about men finding their wife with another man and standing there watching them. I had to ask myself, could it really be fascinating to catch your spouse with another person? I kept thinking about it, and with my jealous nature, I didn't feel like it could be that way for me. I told Deb about these thoughts, and she asked me why I was even thinking about these things. She didn't want anyone but me. I met Deb when we were in our 20s. It was at her sister's wedding. We danced, and after that, we became good friends. She told me that she is a teacher at school, and I told her what factory I work at. We started dating and got married a year later. The next year, we had Kyle, and 2 years after that, Kayla. Deb's sister Sandy was wild, and I had met her years before at school. We weren't dating, but she was quite promiscuous. I probably shouldn't say that, or I would also be considered promiscuous. I was pretty wild in my day, too. She had sex with almost everyone. As far as I know, almost every guy on our football team was with her. I participated in a post-game group sex she was in. Nobody forced her, and she did it more than once. She and one of her friends, Anne, had sex with almost everyone at the first opportunity. I knew her husband, Bob, through work. He was one of the supervisors on the day shift. He has since been transferred to another of our plants. He was as wild as Sandy. He invited me to their wedding. I didn't really care about Bob because I knew what kind of guy he was. I liked him even less when I thought he was trying to hit on Deb after we got married. She told me she thought he was just being nice since he was our son-in-law, but I knew better. I told her that if he ever tries to do anything to her, let me know and I'll kick his ass. She told me to relax. She was mine and mine alone. We agreed to never talk about our past relationships because we were both quite jealous people. I didn't want to go out one night and meet the guy she mentioned having sex with. I also didn't want to explain to her that I was having fun with her sister. When Kyle was 8 and Kayla was 6, they were both in school, and Deb and I got along pretty well, except for the arguments that we all have. We weren't able to see each other while we were on different shifts. During the day, I was alone, and at night, she was alone with the children. It wasn't the best situation for a marriage, but that's how it was. One day when Deb was getting ready for work, she asked me if I could go over to her sister Sandy's and fix her plumbing. Her kitchen sink was leaking and Bob was useless as a jack of all trades. I laughed when she said the word plumbing, and she quickly said, "The sink's plumbing, not my sister's. If you ever try to fix it, you'll regret it." I told Deb I would stop by on the way to work and fix it before I went. She kissed me and went with the children to school. I couldn't help but think about Sandy. From what Bob told me, I knew they were probably in an open marriage. They didn't have children because Sandy always said it would ruin her figure. She did have a pretty good figure, but it was no better than Deb's, and Deb had 2 children. Sandy always tried to come to me. I tried my best to just joke with her. She looked good, but she wasn't worth losing my marriage. I remember her telling me that it would happen someday. Sandy worked part-time as a cashier at a local grocery store. She had the day off, knowing I was coming to fix the plumbing. When I arrived, she was wearing a sexy robe. She offered me a cup of coffee, and we talked for a few minutes before she showed me the sink. I could tell it was just clogged when I pulled everything out from under the sink to disassemble the trap. Her husband could certainly fix this. He probably didn't even try. I lay on my back, hiding my head under the closet and setting the trap back. She threw too many eggshells and potato peelings down the garbage disposal, and it clogged the drain. As I put it back together, she stood astride me so I could look at her robe. She wasn't wearing panties, and she told me in plain text that she wanted to have sex with me. I must admit the spectacle was magnificent. "What are you doing, Sandy?" "I'm going to have sex with you. Do you like what you see?" "Stop it, Sandy, I'm trying to finish this job." She stood back for a minute, and I finished assembling the pipes. When I finished and stood up, Sandy asked, "Are you going to have sex with me?" "No, Sandy, I cannot do it. Deb is your sister, and I love her. I won't cheat on her, especially with her sister." "You slept with me in high school. Are you too good to do this now?" "Sandy, please. I love Deb. She doesn't know about our past together until you tell her. You're a beautiful woman, but I love Deb." "You are a stupid, stupid man. Either you do it, or I'll still tell Deb you did it. She will believe me. I am her sister after all." "Why do you do it? Why should we hurt? Deb is your sister and she loves you." Sandy laughed. "My prim little sister thinks she's a good girl. Well, let's see how she reacts when I tell her about how you entertain me." "Sandy, don't do this. I won't have sex with you, and I'll tell Deb about us in high school. I know she will understand." I grabbed my tools and told her damn sink was ready. I jumped in my truck and drove to work. I felt dizzy. Will Sandy make up a story and lie to Deb? When I got to work, I called Deb, but she wasn't home yet. I left a message. "Deb, I love you, and I want to tell you something about your sister when I get home tonight." I went ahead and started doing my job. I had a hard time concentrating with all this crap going through my head. The day started out as a normal day like any other, but now everything was mixed up. Around 6, I called home again, but no one answered. I called Deb's mom and asked if she knew where Deb was. She dated Sandy and Bob. The children are here. Deb asked if I could watch them for a few hours while they went away. I told her I would just leave them overnight. I like having them here. Is something wrong, Ray? No, everything is okay. If you see her, tell her that I love her, and we'll see her tonight. I need to get back to work. For me, it was one of the longest nights in history. I knew I had to tell Deb about me and her sister. Hell, this was before I even met Deb. I'm sure she would understand. Finally, my day was over, and I went home. I pulled up to the house and saw a car parked in the driveway. I knew it was Sandy. I think it's time to face the music. I went to open the door and it was locked. I took out the keys and couldn't believe what I saw. My wife, Bob, and Sandy were in my living room. Sandy sat on my couch holding Dad's hand. Bob was pulling on his pants. My beautiful wife was lying on the sofa. Her whole posture and appearance screamed that she had just had sex. Everyone was amazed when I opened the door. Sandy had a smile on her face and Bob had a smirk on his face. My wife, Debbie, looked half scared and drunk. Now I had to face reality. I don't know about the guys in the stories, but I didn't like seeing my wife in this position. I was furious as I ran up to Bob and hit him as hard as I could. I knocked him down and started beating him. Behind me, I heard screams. I don't know if it was Deb or Sandy. I must have hit Bob a good 5 times before I felt the blow to the back of my head. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. I looked around and saw a man in uniform. It must have been the local policeman. "I see you have returned to the world of the living. I am Patrolman Gene Andrews." "Where am I and where is my wife? What happened to me?" "Slow down, Mr. Harper. You have a concussion from being hit in the head with a glass vase. It looks like you got into a fight at your home and the police were called. You were supposed to be charged with assault, but the charges were dropped. You're very lucky. You might end up in prison for up to 18 months. "What about the attack on me? You said someone hit me on the head. According to witnesses, you came home and started a fight with your brother-in-law. To get you to stop, his wife hit you on the head with a vase. You were only hit once, and it was done to stop the fight. You should thank them for refusing accusations." Where was my wife when you arrived? When we arrived, your wife was busy in the bathroom. She was not feeling well. Your sister said that she had drunk too much, and you got angry with her. And when you went to her, your brother-in-law stopped you, and you began to fight with him. Everything he did was an attempt to protect himself. When we talked to your wife, she said she doesn't remember much except you yelling at her. If the charges are dropped, then why are you here? My boss called while you were unconscious and told me to wait and take your statement. So, what happened? I have nothing to say. I wasn't going to tell the world that I caught my wife cheating on me with another man. I just lay there and didn't say anything. Okay, as you wish. According to the doctor, you will have to stay here until tomorrow. I suggest you think about what you did and thank God that charges were not brought. You are very lucky, Mr. Harper. The officer left, and I lay there with a terrible headache. What should I do next? I knew I couldn't live with a cheating wife, but I needed to know why she did it. I called my sister to come pick me up the next morning. I had no way of getting home, and I definitely didn't want Deb to pick me up. While I was waiting for Amy, the phone rang. It was Deb. You want me to come get you? We need to talk, now that we're even. Even? What are you talking about? You cheated on me with Bob, and you're saying we're even. Amy's coming for me. I just want to pick up some of my things and leave. What do you mean, leaving? I just evened the score for what you did, Deb replied. I'm not going to discuss this over the phone. Amy and I will come get my things, and then we'll talk. I hung up and waited for Amy. She arrived a few minutes later, and we drove to my house. I asked Amy to wait in the car. I knew she loved Deb, and I didn't want her in our midst. I knocked on the door, and Deb opened it. I asked where the children were, and she said they were still with her mom. I spoke first. Did you receive my phone message? Yes, and Sandy told me how you forced her to have sex. How could you do that? She was crying a little. I didn't do anything like that. That's why I left a message. I went to Sandy's to fix some plumbing. She started pestering me, and I told her no, but she kept insisting. She told me she'd tell you what we were having sex, although this did not happen. I don't believe you. You're lying. Why would my sister lie to me? She's jealous of our marriage. She wanted to see if she could break us up, and it looks like she succeeded. Why do you think she was sitting there? They're in an open marriage and wanted to get you to have sex with Bob. Looks like they both got what they wanted. You let it happen, and now our marriage is dead. No, that's not true. I did it to get back at you. You forced my sister to have sex, and I had sex with Bob to get back at you. Sandy even knew about the mole on your upper thigh. Your sister is a fucking slut. The reason she knew this is because we had sex in school. I never told you because I fell in love with you and didn't want to lose you. Then you said we would never talk about our past relationship, and I forgot about it. I don't know what to believe. Sandy is my sister. And I'm your husband. You couldn't even wait to ask me about it. Instead, you let Bob have sex with you. Do you really think it will solve the problem if I made your sister do something like that? You should. It was too bad for them to convince you of this. But Sandy said, I don't care what your sister said. It's not just about you letting another man have sex with you. It's disrespecting me and distrusting me to even give me the opportunity to hear the accusations against me. If I forced her, why didn't she call the police? She said she didn't want to hurt you with the family scandal. She had no problem hitting me over the head and calling the police here last night. The reason she didn't scream or ask for help is because it never happened. Do what you want. Believe who you want. But this marriage is over. Why? You want to live with someone like me? No, you wanted to have sex with Bob and use me as an excuse. No, that's not true. I love you. You better know the meaning of the word love. It doesn't include sex with other men. I'm going to take a few of my things, and I'll come back next week for the rest of my things when you're not home. I'll see a lawyer on Monday and start the divorce process. Ray, wait. This isn't how it was supposed to end. Sandy said she forgave you and you'll forgive me. I just wanted to get back at you. No, you just cheated on me with Bob and your sister. I went and took a suitcase and put a few personal items in it. What should I tell the children? Tell them whatever you want. Tell them that I forced your sister and that you are a slut. I don't care. I don't want to see you anymore. I'll arrange meetings with the lawyer, and Amy can take the kids so I can see them. I never want to talk to you again." I opened the door and went out. Amy took me to a cheap motel until I found somewhere to move. I told Amy the whole story on the way to the motel. She was my sister and best friend. She knew I was telling the truth. I knew she would help look after Deb and the kids. The weeks passed and it was very difficult for me. I worked all possible overtime because I had more expenses. I found a cheap room that I rented monthly. I ate most of my meals at the bar or on the corner dining table. I saw a lawyer, and since I had no proof of anything, I simply asked for an end to our marriage. He told me Debbie didn't want it, but would agree to whatever I wanted. Everything was divided almost in half. We were renting a house, so she just took over the payments. Our savings were divided equally, and she had to give me half the value of our things. I had to pay child support, which didn't really bother me. I loved my children and missed them very much. The problem was that I also missed Debbie, but I knew we were done. I tried to attend all school events that did not interfere with my work. Both of our children had birthdays, and I attended them as long as I didn't have to be around Debbie's family. I spoke to Deb politely, but every time she wanted to talk about us, I walked away. I saw my kids every other weekend, and sometimes during the week, depending on my work schedule. Deb must have called me almost every day after that, right up until the divorce. If she wanted to talk about children or household chores, I listened. When she wanted to talk about us, I hung up. I went over to my sister's for dinner one day and played with my kids. Amy said Sandy still stuck to her story about me forcing her to have sex. She told me that Deb was really struggling between what Sandy was saying and what I was saying. I tried to explain to Amy that I had no evidence one way or the other. It was just my word against hers. And Debbie believed her. This is what hurt the most. One afternoon, while I was in my apartment, I received a call from school. They told me that Kyle was not feeling well and asked if I could pick him up. Of course, I agreed and went after him. He had a cold and a cough. Debbie was working at the middle school, and I called her to tell her I was picking up Kyle. She said she would come as soon as she could. I brought Kyle home, put him to bed, and took his temperature. He had a slight fever, but nothing serious. About an hour later, Deb arrived with Kayla. She quickly went in to see how Kyle was doing. While she was inside, the phone rang. I didn't think about it when I answered it out of habit. It was Sandy. "What are you doing over there?" she asked. "Well, unless it's a damn liar. Kyle got sick and I brought him home. Don't worry, you ruined the damn marriage." I pressed the record button on the answering machine. This was the guy who could record a conversation from both sides. "Is he okay?" "Why do you care? You destroyed his parents. Why should you worry about him?" "Listen, Ray, this just got out of hand. You knew we were in an open marriage, and Bob wanted to try my little sister. If you had sex with me like I asked, this would never have gotten out of hand. Control. But no, you come home and start fighting. You told Deb that I forced you to have sex. Then you have Bob, who actually forced Deb. What the hell kind of sister are you?" "Bob never forced her. She gave it voluntarily. Hell, she'd probably do it again if Bob tried. She was drunk and you put all this crap into her head and then stood there while your husband had sex with her. The problem is, Ray, you can't prove it. I told you from the very beginning that she would believe me and not you, and now you know. Anytime you need some fun, call me. Tell Deb to call me later. I hope my nephew feels better." She hung up and I turned off the recorder. Debbie asked who called, and I told her, "Your wonderful angel sister who would never lie to you." What did she want? I recorded her message and she said to call her back. "Well, I'll see you in court on Thursday. I guess we can call it Freedom Day. Don't forget to listen to the message," I said as I approached my truck. About 5 minutes later, my cell phone started ringing over and over again. She must have called me 10 times before I got home. When I got home, my phone was ringing again. Finally, I took it. "Ray, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I just talked to Sandy and she told me the truth about what happened." "Well, that's nice to hear, but it doesn't change anything in my mind. You cheated on me with Bob and didn't even give me a chance to explain myself. After I told you the truth, you still chose your sister's story. thinking that the truth was on her side. I want to tell you one thing. I loved you and probably always will. But I also hate you for what you did to our family, and for the lack of trust you had in me. I took the next 2 days off on Thursday. I went to my lawyer's office and signed the papers. I wanted to leave before Deb arrived. I was extremely depressed as I headed to a nearby bar. I was doing pretty well with my drinks when I looked back and saw Bob coming in. He didn't notice me when I walked up to his side and gave him a cold tug. When he fell, I hit him again and again. 3 guys pulled me away from him. I remembered saying, "You damn son of a bitch! I will kill you for what you did to my family. I hope you burn in hell." The police put me on the floor, handcuffed me, and took me to a patrol car. This time, I was sent to prison. I was allowed 1 phone call, and I called my sister Amy. I told her what I did and that she didn't have to post bail. It would have been too expensive, and I was going to serve my sentence. She cried when I hung up. Debbie came to the prison to see me, but I refused to see her. It took almost 2 months before my case went to trial. I was charged with assault and pleaded guilty. I received 2 years minus the time served. I told Amy to take my few belongings and store them in the basement for me. She told me that Debbie was feeling very bad and wanted to see me. I told her I didn't want to see her. I know you don't want to hear this, but Debbie really loves you. Her family is furious about what Sandy said about you. There's something else you should know. Debbie never came to sign the divorce decree, so you are still married. I went to jail, and that's not where you want to live. It was a completely different world. I constantly got into fights. I had to defend myself to every group here. I wasn't a sycophant to anyone. I tried to stay away from everyone, but other prisoners kept testing me. I was in the medical bay twice in the first 2 months due to cuts. I had fights almost every day. I must have paid my debts because they didn't bother me as often after that. On the day of the visit, I decided to go to my visitor. I thought it would be Amy or my father, but it was Debbie. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She looked so sweet and beautiful. I actually wanted to hug her, but I was acting like an angry Ray. "Ray, I love you, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I brought you pictures of the kids. They miss you so much, and so do I." Tears streamed down her face. "Listen, my life is different now. Just take care of my children and tell them I love them." She handed me several photographs of children. These were their last school photos, and they looked so cute. "Ray, I didn't sign the divorce papers. I will wait for you. I don't care how long it takes. I made a terrible, terrible mistake, but I know we can get through this if you still love me." I didn't know what to say. Of course I felt that I still loved her. I just hated what she did and didn't believe me. I stood up and walked back to my cell. I left her by the window and didn't look back. I was working in the kitchen and overheard a conversation about how someone was going to attack a prisoner for killing his friend. They were going to try to corner him in the dining room the next evening. I couldn't tell anyone without becoming an informer. I decided to tell him. This would make me part of his group. I didn't want to belong to any groups, but I couldn't let this man die the next day. Fergal wasn't sure whether to believe me or not. I told him to believe what he wants. I didn't tell the guards and was probably taking a risk by telling him. He looked into my eyes. He said that you can tell a lot about a person by looking into his eyes. He told me to stay away from him the next day. He will handle the situation without letting anyone know what I told him. The prisoner was sent to solitary confinement, and Fergal sat back down to finish his dinner. I couldn't believe how calmly he took it all. After that day, Fergal began to talk to me regularly. When we talked in our cell, he was a completely different person than outside. Outside the cell, he was as tough as could be. Everyone knew that he was the leader of his group. He asked me about Debbie and the children. He told me that he had 3 children, but of course they never came to see him because he killed their mother. He told me that his youngest daughter, Angie, yes, I think so, but at the same time I hate what she did to our family. Does she still love you? She says yes, but I can't forgive her. Why not? Look where you are now. You've hit rock bottom, baby. If I had a woman who loved me and said she'd wait for me, I'd be the happiest man in the world. But what about not trusting and believing me and having sex with another man? Hell, you killed your wife and her lover for the same thing. and I regret it every day of my life. I wish I could have given her a second chance and gotten my family back. Trust me, Ray, don't hold a grudge. It will kill you very slowly. God, how he made me think. Was he right? What will I do when I get out? I will have no job, no future, and, for now, no family. The next month I had a visitor again. Debbie is back. She smiled at me and was in tears. The kids drew you some more pictures. She placed them on the tray and I looked at them. They miss you, Ray. God, I miss you so much. Will you ever forgive me so we can be a family again? I promise I'll do the best I can. I don't talk to Sandy or Bob after what she did to us. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I thought to myself, she didn't believe me once, so the next time someone says something, she'll probably believe them more than me. Deb, I've been thinking a lot. I want to forgive you, but I don't know if I can. Seeing you with Bob is not something I can forget. No, I hated it. When you came in, I saw your face and I felt bad. I realized what I did was wrong when I wanted revenge when I saw you. Of course, I can never forget it. I would never do that if I weren't so drunk. There's only one man I need, and that's you, Ray, the father of our 2 children. A couple of weeks later, I had another visitor. It was Amy. Ray, remember I told you that Deb doesn't see Sandy anymore? I was driving by the house, and I saw Sandy and Bob come into the house. I don't know why they were there, so I just drove by. I just thought you'd be worth knowing. Now I'm confused again. Did Deb lie to me again? I was ready to forgive her and try to rebuild my life with her. I knew Amy wouldn't lie to me. I needed to find out why Deb was seeing Sandy and Bob again. About a month later, Fergal and I were talking, and he told me that he thought he owed me a favor for what I had done for him. He said he was a lawyer before he went to prison and still has some connections. He was going to see if he could get me out of the parole program. I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but he never lied to me. It may seem strange to say this about a criminal, but I respected him. I have often thought what a good lawyer he must have been. His speech and status commanded respect. I knew better than to question his statement. I accepted his words. A few weeks later, I was called into the chief's office, and there was a meeting of the parole board. The chief spoke first. Mr. Harper, we have an application for your early release. I don't know who you know, but it has been suggested that we speak with you. After reviewing your file, we see that you had difficulty adjusting in the first months. Is this correct? Yes, sir. I was probably not cut out for prison life, but I tried to adapt. If you get out early, where are you going to live and how are you going to survive? I thought quickly. I knew it was an all-or-nothing question. Well, sir, I have a sister who is also my best friend. She and her husband said that when I get out, I can live with them until I get back on my feet. Are you married, Mr. Harper? Yes, sir, but we were in the process of getting a divorce when I was convicted. At this point, I'm not sure where things stand with our marriage. I'm just trying to be honest with you. We thank you for your honesty. We knew you were divided and wanted to see how open you would be with us. Sir, about the job, my previous employer said that I was a good worker and that I should come to him when I was released. What are your chances of going back to prison? It makes us look pretty bad when a paroled prisoner comes back. I promise you, sir, that I never want to see the inside of these prison walls again. Return to your cell, Mr. Harper, and we will contact you by the end of the month. Yes, sir, and thank you for at least considering me for parole. I returned to my cell, and Fergal asked me how it went. I told him about my conversation with the commission and asked if he had anything to do with it. You never know, but if you leave early, I expect a carton of cigarettes a week to be deposited into my account. He laughed. Debbie returned a few days later and said that someone from the parole board had come to her house. Are you getting parole? She asked. What did they want? What did they say? I asked nervously. They asked how we were getting along and if you could live there. I told them we were separated, but I would be glad to see you back, she said rather nervously. I changed the subject. You told me you don't see Sandy anymore. Have you seen her? She's my sister. I don't see her that often. I interrupted her. And Bob, have you seen him recently? Why are you asking me this? She really looked nervous. You can't be reliable. You told me you wouldn't see Sandy, but it turns out she and Bob were at your house. Have you met Bob again? Is that what's bothering you about parole? Tell your lover Bob, when I get out, I'll finish what I started, and if you're having fun with him at that moment, I'll take care of you too." Deb started and ran out of the visitor's room. I knew my suspicions were correct. I wasn't ready to go back to the same damn situation that landed me here in the first place. I didn't intend to kill anyone. I just wanted to give them a good scare. I called my sister Amy and she came to see me. I told her about the conversation with Deb and how she sympathized with me. She told me that the parole board came to see her and she told them that I could stay with them as long as needed. Her husband Kenny was there and said I was always welcome there. Did they call Mr. Parker about my job? Yeah, they called and he said you could go back to your old job. You were one of their best employees. God, Amy, you've lifted my spirits so much, I really hope they don't turn me down. You won't be turned away. They told me that since you have a place to live and a job, you'll probably be released at the beginning of the month. She began to cry. Amy was right. I was called and informed that I would be released next week. I was given the name of a lawyer who will handle my case. I should have contacted the agency first upon release. I didn't understand why I needed to see a lawyer and not a parole officer. I was told that a lawyer's firm had arranged for my release. They needed to see me and process my paperwork, and then they would refer me to a parole officer. I thanked Fergal, and he reminded me of the cigarettes. I told him he would have them. To be honest, I didn't know if he had anything to do with my yearly release, but it's worth a box of cigarettes a week to be free. When I came out of the gati, my sister Amy was standing there crying. I hugged her and kissed her. "Welcome back, brother." I went to Amy and her husband greeted me. I knew that I was truly welcome there. Of course I asked about Deb and my children. Amy told me that after I spoke with Deb in prison, she signed the final divorce papers. It seemed my assumptions about Deb were correct, but now I was a free man. I knew I needed to see Deb and make regular appointments with my kids. I called to make sure she was home. I didn't want any surprises or to end up in prison again. I tried to explain to her that I was not coming to cause trouble. We could even talk on the porch. I just wanted to arrange regular meetings with my children. She agreed to see me, but said she would call the police if I started trouble. When I arrived home, my children ran out to me shouting, "Dad! Dad! You're back!" I hugged them. How I missed them. I talked to them for a few minutes and told them to ride their bikes, while Mom and I would sit on the porch and watch them. "What do you want, Ray? You've made it absolutely clear that we will never be a family again. We move on with our lives. Debbie, they are my children too, and I want them to be a part of my life. I was ready to forgive you, but you lied to me again. You just had to get back together with Bob and Sandy. I know what kind of people they are and what kind of people they communicate with. Ray, you were in jail and I was lonely. Don't tell me that crap. I know you've been seeing someone. I don't care who you sleep with. I'm here to tell you that if I find out that my children are being exposed to this lifestyle, I will do whatever it takes to get them away from you. Understand? This isn't just some empty threat. My kids mean a lot to me, and I want them to have a good life. Ray, I would never do anything to harm my children. You already did it. You destroyed our family. I will make sure my children stay away from people like this. I will see my lawyer tomorrow and learn about my rights. I don't believe you anymore. You showed me your true colors. I'm done with you, but we have 2 kids to raise, and I'm going to make sure they're raised in a good environment. I promise you, Ray, that I won't get sucked into this lifestyle. Yes, I tried. I admit it, but it's not for me or my children. You'll see. I've changed. I don't believe you, and remember, actions speak louder than words. My kids came over, and I talked to them about school and what they were doing. I told them that I was now living with Aunt Amy, but that I would find a place closer and spend more time with them. I kissed and hugged them goodbye and headed back to Amy. The next morning, I went to the law firm that represented me. It was a little strange going there. I have not yet spoken to the lawyer who helped me get parole. I went to the reception and took out the card that the parole board had given me. "Can I speak to Mr. A.J. Brady, please? I have an appointment. I'm Ray Harper." The receptionist smiled at me. Miss Brady will see you shortly. Please have a seat, Mr. Harper. I asked myself if she said Miss Brady. The card said A.J. Brady, so I just assumed it was a man. I was sitting thinking when a gorgeous woman in a dark blue suit approached me. She smiled and extended her hand in greeting. "Ray Harper, I guess," she said, shaking my hand. "I'm A.J. Brady. I know we haven't met yet, but I've been assigned to review your case, and as you can see, we'll discuss the rest. Please follow me to my office. Mary, I don't want to be disturbed. Please. Take all calls and tell me I'll call you back." "Yes, Miss Brady," the receptionist replied. I followed her into her office. I would follow her anywhere. She was an incredibly attractive woman. "Well, Mr. Harper, we finally met. Please call me Ray if you don't mind. I owe you my life, and I don't even know why you did it." "Mr. Harper, that is Ray. I was assigned to your case. Your lawyer allowed you to plead guilty without trying to help you. You had many mitigating factors that he did not bring up. You just signed divorce papers. The man, part of the reason for your divorce, entered the place where you were. You were unable to think adequately at that moment. These factors and others could have led to a lesser sentence. Of course, you committed the assault, but your punishment was too severe. I pointed this out to the parole board, and they agreed with me to some extent. I asked, "Why, Miss Brady? Why me? Who asked you to help me? Can I call you anything other than Miss Brady? After all, I feel like you saved my life and gave it back to me. Look, Ray, I was asked to help you and I did. Is it really important to know who asked me? As for my name, I guess you can call me AJ. I became friends with a man in prison. His name was Fergal. He told me that he would help me get out early. He also told me that he has a daughter that he loves and that she is a lawyer. I was wondering if it was you, the daughter he mentioned." My new lawyer's eyes sparkled. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Yes, Fergal. I mean, Dave. My dad's name is Dave, and he asked me to look at your file. He's never asked me to do this before, so he must have really loved you. I was surprised when he asked, but I would do anything for my father." "AJ, can I call you Angie? I know we just met and you're my lawyer, but you're too beautiful for me to call you AJ, and I certainly don't want to call you Ms. Brady. What does AJ even stand for it?" "Angelina Juanita Brady is my name. Now you understand why I chose AJ. Well, Ray, we have a lot of issues that we need to discuss. Can we go to lunch together?" I asked. "Ray, I don't date clients." "It's not a date, it's lunch. I need to eat something before I go to work in a couple of hours. If you don't want to call it a date, then you can pay and call it a business meeting. You take clients to lunch sometimes, isn't it?" Angie smiled, and her big dimples became visible. "Well, no. No dates with clients, but yes, I eat sometimes. Let me tell Mary we're leaving and we can go to lunch." I watched as she stood up. She was a very attractive woman. She had both looks and character. This combination is rarely found among lawyers. We went to a really nice, quiet restaurant for lunch. After ordering lunch, she explained to me how I would need to meet with my parole officer. She said he was a pretty nice person, but I would have to follow the rules and stay out of trouble. I was supposed to see him twice a month for a couple of months and then once a month for the rest of the year. "Angie, you know everything about me. Are you going to tell me anything about yourself?" "Ray, I don't think it's appropriate to discuss my personal life. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I love seeing your dimples when you smile." "Ray, please. I already told you I don't date clients, but thanks for the compliments." She couldn't help but blush. "Tell me about your law degree, that's business. I have a right to know that as a client." She tried not to smile. "Okay, Ray, I got my law degree on a scholarship. I've been an attorney for several years now. My specialty is criminal law." Our lunches arrived and we started eating. I couldn't take my eyes off Angie. "Will we see each other again, Angie?" "You should actually come back next week to fill out the paperwork you'll get from your parole officer." "Can we go to lunch again? I'll even pay." I could tell she had softened a little. "Okay, but this will be a lunch to discuss business matters." She couldn't help but smile. After lunch, we returned to the office. When she extended her hand to say goodbye, I simply held it in my arms for a few seconds. I wondered what she was thinking. I hoped she didn't think I was some kind of crazy person. We said goodbye, and I told her I was already looking forward to our lunch next week. Her secretary looked at her and smiled. I guess clients don't often turn to their lawyers the way I do. But again, most lawyers don't look like Angie. I went to work and it was great. I immediately returned to my duties. It's like riding a bike. You just sit down and start pedaling. Most of the guys I used to work with were still there. They seemed to treat me with new respect. Nobody contacted me. The next 2 Mondays, I had meetings with Angie. She tried to keep everything business-like, but I wanted to know more about her. In the 4th week of our communication, she told me that all business issues between us had been resolved. "Are you still my lawyer?" I asked. "Why, of course, if you have any problems, you just need to call me," she replied. "Angie, I'm afraid I'm going to have to fire you. I'm really sorry." "What? Fire me? Oh my God. Why? I helped you get out of prison and I didn't even charge you, and you want to fire me?" "Yeah. You said you don't date your clients, and I want a real date with you. I want to take you out to a real dinner and maybe dance. I want to get to know you better. I know I just got out of jail and I work in a factory, but I want to be with you." Angie had tears in her eyes. "Ray, I have to admit that I'm a little attached to you, but he's a factory worker and an ex-con, right? You think we shouldn't be together?" No, that's not true. You're my client, I'm your lawyer. What will people think? Who cares? Just go out with me once. If you don't like it, you'll know not to go again. Follow your heart. Go out with me on Saturday night. Look, I know I just got out of jail and been blocked for a while. I don't know where this will lead, but I'm willing to try. Oh God, I know I shouldn't do this, but I agree. I'll go once. But I'm warning you, don't try to get me into bed. Oh God, I can't believe I said that, replied Angie. We met on Saturday. I rented my sister's car. I didn't want to invite Angie into my old truck. She gave me her address, and it was a townhouse. When I knocked on the door and she answered, I saw the most gorgeous woman. I know that all men see women differently. In my eyes, she looked great but beautiful. I wanted to grab her and hug her tightly right there. I knew I had to act like a gentleman, but it was difficult. We went to a fancy restaurant and ordered wine, followed by dinner. We decided to talk for a while after dinner while listening to music. Angie, you know I love you, right? I wouldn't be here now if I thought otherwise. I want you to make love to me. It's been a long time since I had a man I trusted. All I ask is that you be gentle and considerate. I don't want to be used. I want to be made love to. We started on the couch and made our way to the bedroom. We did everything we wanted, from massaging her feet to licking the whipped cream off her belly. We spent half the night making love. I really enjoyed holding her after making love. It felt so good to snuggle and hold her close. It's been so long since I've done this. She stayed with me all night. I got up before her and made us French toast. She came out of the bedroom wearing one of my t-shirts. This t-shirt has never looked so good, I told her. I couldn't believe she looked so good even in the morning. She quickly took a shower and we sat down to talk. Angie, what's next? You know I love you, and my kids love you, and my whole family loves you. What do you want to happen next, Ray? Just like that, talking like a lawyer. We've only known each other for a few months and we've only made love once. I know it's only a few months, but I want you in my life every day. If we haven't made love enough, we can go back to the bedroom and spend the day there. Angie smiled at this comment. Angie, I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me? Angie had tears in her eyes. Ray, I don't take love lightly. I've made a mistake before. Yes, I will marry you. I want you to know that I will always be there for you and the children. I know what you went through in your first marriage. I will always be honest with you and will never cheat on you. I will expect the same from you. She came up to me and kissed me passionately. Honey, what's wrong? You look happy but sad at the same time, I asked her. These are my thoughts about my father and how happy he would be. Most young girls dream of that special wedding day, how they will be dressed in a white dress and walk down the aisle with their father handing them to their husband. I know that this will never happen to me, and that makes me sad. She was crying a little. My father didn't even know I was getting married the first time. By the time I wrote to him, I had already suffered a miscarriage and was on the way to divorce. I'm sorry, Ray, I shouldn't think about this now. In the end, after all, I'm marrying the man my father approved of and whom I loved from the moment I met him. What? You loved me from the very beginning. I wanted you from the moment I saw you, but I know you knew that. She gave me a sweet smile and asked when I wanted to legalize our union. I told her that all decisions regarding the organization would be at her discretion. We both agreed that this should happen as soon as possible. I asked her if I could start telling everyone, and she said she was going to do the same thing. We just needed to set a date. We decided that it would be in 2 months. I was on cloud 9 for the next few days. I told Amy and her husband Kenny. They were both very happy for us. I had to tell the kids. I called them at home and asked them both to pick up the phone to tell them at the same time. They both screamed with happiness and said how much they loved Angie. I told them it would be in a couple of months, but I wanted them to be one of the first to know. I walked into Angie's office and Mary, her secretary, congratulated us. She said that Angie told everyone and invited everyone to the wedding reception. She called Angie and told me to come over. Angie was waiting for me. When I walked in, Angie was crying. "What happened, Angie?" I called the prison and spoke to the warden, asking if my father could get a day's leave to attend our wedding. He told me that my father was not allowed to leave the prison under any circumstances. His life sentence meant just that. He said that it was beyond his power and that he could do nothing. I'm so sorry, Angie. I know having your dad at the wedding would mean a lot to you. Things are even worse, Ray. Dad has cancer, which has come back. He was given 3 to 6 months to live. She started crying even harder, and I hugged her, trying to console her. I wish I could do something for you, Angie. I've bought cigarettes for your father since I was released. That was our agreement. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Dad doesn't smoke anymore. He uses the packs of cigarettes people send him to trade with other prisoners. You didn't contribute to his cancer. I had an idea, but I didn't want to tell Angie so as not to give her false hope. I kissed her goodbye and told her I would see her the next day. I took the next day off and went to the prison to see Fergal and the warden. When Fergal saw me, he smiled. Take care of my little girl, Ray. All I ask is that you make her happy. She deserves so much more than she got in life. I explained my idea to him, and at first he said no, but eventually agreed if I could convince the warden. So I told him I'd be back later and went to the boss. Well, Ray, I see you're keeping your nose to the wind and getting married. I'm sorry, Fergal, but he is sentenced to life imprisonment, and we cannot let him go to his daughter's wedding. Chief, do you have complete control over the prison and can make most decisions regarding its operation? What are you getting at, Ray? Could we have a wedding on the prison grounds? We could use the chapel, and the killer could walk his daughter down the aisle. You and daughter Fergal want to get married here? In prison so her father could be present? Is this what you are suggesting? Yes, sir, she would love for her father to be there. All we ask is the use of the chapel for our wedding. I know prisoners' weddings have taken place here in the past. Okay, Ray. I'll organize it from our end. It can't be a big event. You can only invite 3 people from outside, besides you and your fiancé. I'll let the killer invite a few of his prisoner friends. You'll have to use the prison chaplain. I thanked the boss and returned to Fergal. Dave laughed when I called him by his real name. The boss agreed to support my idea. I'll go tell Angie now. Thanks, Dave. I know it means a lot to our girl. Dave smiled at me. Ray, write down this number I'll give you. It's the one I put aside for Angie. When you go to the bank, tell Angie to take your birth certificate. The account is in her maiden name. I wrote down the information and told Dave I was sorry to hear about his illness. Just take care of my little girl. That's all I ask, Dave replied. I returned to Angie's office. When she saw the smile on my face, she asked what happened. Do you mind having a wedding in prison? I asked. What? What are you talking about, Ray? I explained to her about my conversation with the warden and what her father would be able to do here to the altar. She started crying with happiness. God, I love you so much, Ray. I told her about the bank safe and we went to check what was in there. I'm Angelina Juanita Miller Brady. I'd like to check the contents of my safe. Angie gave him her number, and he led us to the safes, opened them for us, and left us alone. The first thing we saw was a note from her father. Dear Angie, if you open this safe, you're either getting married or I'm dead. I hope it's the former. Inside the little box is your mother's engagement ring. Everyone was wondering where it went, but I left it here for you. Want you to wear it with pride. Your mother had her faults, but she loved you, and I know she would want you to have her ring. Also, here are bonds worth over $15,000 to help pay for your wedding. I organized this before I was jailed. When you see your brother and sister, tell them they have safes too if they haven't already used them. You're the only one with a ring. Congratulations, and always be honest with your husband. With love, Dad. Angie and I discussed our wedding. We decided to invite her brother Brad and sister Lisa if they agreed to come. We also invited my sister Amy. We invited family and friends to our wedding reception, which took place shortly after the ceremony. Angie and Amy spent the next month organizing everything for the reception. We paid extra for everything since it was a short stay, but I wanted Angie to have everything she dreamed of. Amy said she would use her digital camera and take photos. When the wedding day came, Angie and I went to the prison together. Amy and her husband arrived, but her husband was waiting in the car. When we entered, I handed over the suit for Fergla. One of the guards took it to him. I had my own tuxedo that I rented for the occasion. Amy went into the other room with Angie to help her into her wedding dress. Angie didn't want me to see her before the ceremony. I entered the chapel to wait for Angie. Brad and Lisa came in. Brad was my best man, and Lisa was my bridesmaid. There was a small piano in the chapel, and one of the prisoners played songs on it. The guard brought 5 other prisoners, Dave's friends, and sat them down. The warden came in with the minister and smiled. He came up to me and said that after the ceremony, there would be cake and punch for everyone, provided by the boss. For a prison warden, he wasn't that bad. The pianist began to play Here Comes the Bride, and everyone stood up. Angie appeared at the door, led by her father. They both cried. Angie got her dream of being walked down the aisle by her father. When they reached the altar, everyone sat down except our small wedding group. Another guard entered and closed the door. The minister said, "Who is giving this woman to this man?" "I give it away, sir," Dave answered proudly and sat down. "Angelina Juanita Miller Brady, do you accept Raymond Michael Harper as your husband?" The minister continued his words and then asked me a similar question. We are convinced that he said, "Love and respect from now on and forever and ever." This was how we both felt. No one can ever come between us. We've both been through hardships up to this point. We knew we would do whatever it took to make our marriage work. After we said our vows, I kissed the bride. She then turned around and kissed and hugged her father. We all headed into the next room to talk a little and enjoy the cake and punch provided by the boss. Brad and Lisa walked up to their father and hugged him. This was the first time they had spoken or seen him in almost 15 years. There were many tears, both joy and regret. They knew their father was dying, and they wanted him to know that they still loved him. Amy took many photos of Angie and I during the short ceremony. She also took as many photographs of Dave with his 3 children as possible. She recorded the cries, hugs, and even some laughter they shared during that short time. She left, and she and her husband took the photos to the 24-hour photo center for printing and some enlargements. We said goodbye to Dave and the warden. We thanked him for making Angie's dream a reality. As we were leaving, we noticed that Brad and Lisa were still talking to their father. It was a wonderful sight. We headed back to town for our wedding reception. Everyone we invited came. The first people we saw were Kyle and Kayla, who were jumping for joy as we got out of the car. They ran up to us and hugged us. We entered the hall and were greeted with shouts of joy. My parents were there with tears in their eyes, as were most of those greeting us. Many of Angie's friends came to congratulate us. I saw most of them for the first time. I noticed Mary when she came over and hugged us. About half an hour later, Amy brought the photographs. She enlarged several of our photographs. She laid them all out on the table for everyone to see. Brad and Lisa came home to pick up their families. Brad was with his wife and 2 children. Lisa was with her husband and 3 children. 2 families walked up to Dave's photo and told the children it was their grandfather. Amy told them she took 4 sets of photos, and after the reception, each family could take a set home. There was a set for Brad and Lisa, 1 for Angie and I, and of course 1 for Amy. I wish I could tell you how incredible Angie looked in her wedding dress. If she had wings, she would look like an angel sent by God. To me, she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and now she was my wife. I think most men feel the same way about their wives. For those wondering, Deb didn't come to our wedding. It was Angie's day, and I didn't want anything to ruin it. Seeing her with her father walking down the aisle, watching her brother and sister make peace with their father. The family is united again. I will never forget this day. 6 months have passed since our wedding day. Debbie and Pat got married last month. It made me happy to see that she was really trying to get her life together. My children tell me that Pat treats them well. I asked about Aunt Sandy and Uncle Bob, and my kids said they had moved to another state. I switched to the day shift so I could see my kids more and be home with Angie every evening. She is pregnant with our child. Exactly 3 months after our wedding, Fergal died. His children visited him every month until his death. It was sad, but we managed to tell him about Angie's pregnancy. We told him it was going to be a boy and we would name him David Raymond. This brought a smile to Dave's face. I look back on everything that happened. An unfaithful wife, prison, meeting the woman of my dreams, and then our wedding. Now I'm starting over and will soon become a father again. Not a day goes by that I don't thank God for what I have. I thank him for giving me and Angie another chance at happiness. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.